Next item is final site plan and architectural review and PUD review, 130 Delafield Street. A request from Mandel Group to approve final site plan and architectural review for a 219-unit multifamily development in 2 buildings on approximately 5.2 acres along the west side of Delafield Street, north of Madison Street. And that would be Doug is going to do the presentation.
Thank you. So this is for the property across the street, a little over 5 acres on 4 city-owned parcels. This was last before you at your August meeting. At that time, the rezoning was approved to rezone the property to RM, or to recommend approval of rezoning the property to RM3 with the PUD overlay. At that meeting, these plans were considered when making that decision on the rezoning. Then when it came time to approve the plans, there was some discussion, and it was decided to be tabled at that time. So now they're back before you. You had asked for maybe some additional information, so some of that's been provided now. And so it's back before the commission, again, for consideration. But again, that's just the kind of the brief history of it. So back in August, the rezoning part was approved. Now the plans are back before you again for consideration. So here's the site. You can see there's the 4 parcels of city-owned land, one up at the north, and then going down the site. I don't know why my pointer's not moving. Sorry about that. So then there's a parcel up at the north, one along the west side, and then the 2 fronting on Delafield Street as well, going north to south. Here was just the survey that was approved earlier this summer, bringing the parcels under one. And then our land use plan, shown here, this proposal would be consistent with our city land use plan. The red rust color with the yellow crosshatch calls for residential or commercial uses on this area. So this would be consistent with that. Also looking at our central city master plan, it also identifies this site for residential development. Also note that higher density is encouraged by plans in the central city area. And also from this location, there's ample outdoor open space recreational opportunities within walking distance, such as Horde Park, the River Walk, Moore Downs Golf Course, and also within walking distance would be all the retail amenities in our downtown. So these are the kind of areas where we would like to see higher density developments occur, where you have access to a bunch of different amenities. And then again, at the August meeting, the rezoning came in. The land had previously been B3 and I1 institutional. Plan Commission did recommend at that time that the property be rezoned to RM3 with the PUD overlay after reviewing these plans. Also, just to point out, there was some discussion about doing things that were inconsistent or not appropriate with our zoning code. And I just wanted to point out that PUD overlay is section 22.53 of our zoning code. So anything we do with the PUD is acceptable as part of our zoning code. It's included in our code to offer relief to restrictions when the Plan Commission and the Council see it appropriate. And this is included in the zoning code as a tool for the city to use and does not go against or violate the zoning code. It's just using it's a section of our code that does allow this as the PUD as a special tool to offer relief from certain restrictions that are typically found under a straight zoning ordinance. Then looking at the site plans for the site, again, excuse me, there's 219 units across the 4 buildings. I mean, the 2 buildings, 2 4-story buildings, I should say. So there's a north building, and then there is a south building. The north building has 113 units in it, and the south building has 106 units. So the floor plan or the site plan on the left, the area in blue shows the extent of the underground parking area. So you can see on the north building, then there's the access off of Delafield Street in between the two buildings that goes back to a surface lot, and then you can see the south building below that. And then the site plan on the right shows the footprint of the apartment buildings on top of the underground parking. So this would be most of the section that you'd see above the ground. So that blue in the L shape for the southern building, and then the kind of curvy L shape for the northern building. And that would be the above ground portions of the building that would be most noticeable. The site does lose about 30 feet of elevation from north to south as you go down Delafield Street heading towards Madison Street. So the two buildings were placed to take advantage of that grade and provide underground parking. So at the north end of both the buildings, they're about 50 feet tall. And then as you go towards the south end of the building, the full grade height from where the garage would enter up to the roof line would be about 62, 64 feet high. That would be on both of those buildings as you go down the street. But they did locate in a way that you could get the access to the parking. So from the north building, access would be coming in from this main entrance that gets back to the surface lot. Then access to the south building would come in off of Madison Street, where the grade's matching up with where you can get into the garage. This would be the entrance, and there would also be an entrance and exit, and there'd also be an exit only off onto Delafield Street from that southern building as well. But that would only be exit only on Delafield Street. So here you can see where the three different access points will be then onto Delafield Street. Looking at the the northern circle, that's under the north building. The north building has parking for 153 spaces, plus it also has the surface parking for an additional 38 spaces. So we have about almost 190 of the spaces will access onto Delafield Street here at this location. And then there is 101 parking spaces under the south building. So 190 to the north that will use the north, and then 190 from the south building. They'll have the opportunity to enter or exit from Madison Street, and also have another opportunity to exit off of Delafield Street. So that'll disperse that exiting traffic from the two locations. Overall, for the project, there's 1.33 spaces per unit. Mandel, they've done quite a few apartment developments around the area. They aim for 1.3 spaces per unit. For example, the Bridgewalk Apartments recently completed along St. Paul, they had 1.29 spaces per unit for that development. So again, there will be 190 spaces for the north part of the building, and then 101 spaces divided with exits out of either of these two and the entrance coming in off of Madison Street. Should also note, Madison is a designated hospital route by the city. So the Public Works Department has priority snowplow attention on Madison Street to make sure that route does stay open and passable in times of storm. They'll have special plows dedicated just to keeping Madison Street in the overnight hours, things like that. So it is one of the more frequently plowed of any of the streets in the city. And then looking at the traffic counts. So here are the peak hour traffic counts, which from the traffic studies are from 7:15 to 8:15 in the morning. And then in parentheses are the numbers from 3:45 to 4:45 in the afternoon. So these were traffic studies provided by the developer, reviewed extensively by our engineering department, and they all came to an agreement that these were appropriate numbers for the site. So you can see here at the north end, exiting the site in the morning would be about 50 cars during that hour. And in the afternoon, there would be about 30 cars exiting, 15 to the north, 15 to the south, and 25 to the north, 25 to the south, respectively. And then coming back into the site, they would expect 25 cars from the north in the afternoon and 25 from the south in the afternoon. And then leaving would be 5, excuse me, those are the ones entering at those two different times. Looking to the exit portion on Delafield Street for the south building, they would show 5 cars leaving in the morning going north, 5 cars leaving in the morning going south, and then the same in the afternoon. There'd be about 5 cars they predict coming out of that exit. And then up on Madison Street, for entering into the site off of Madison Street, they would be showing 5 cars in the morning from the south and 5 from the north, or 0 from the north. And then in the afternoon, returning to Madison Street would be 15 cars from the south during that hour and 5 cars from the north. And exiting out of Madison in the morning at the peak hours would be 5 cars going either direction during that hour for a total of 10 cars at this location over an hour. And then leaving in the afternoon, they would, the models show 5 cars from this exit in the afternoon. And those cars would be spread out over a 1-hour time period. Of the peak time agreed upon is 7:15 to 8:15, and then again 3:45 to 4:45. Here, just to kind of show you the grading plan, you can see that the topo lines, not only does it slope down as you go to the south, but this is turned to fit it all into the site, so north is actually to the right in this case. But then looking to the west or up on this map, you can see the opposite kind of occurs, and it goes up as it goes to the west. And then the houses that all are front up on Mandel Street are at a much higher elevation than the Delafield Street side. Because of the hill on the western side, you can see the development has all been pushed up towards the Delafield Street side of the development. There will be several retaining walls that will have to be used to take up some of the grade on those eastern corners where the hill comes down too far into the site. And you can see some of those there. Here'd be the typical, they're using a keystone type retaining wall with a safety railing above. Here's where the locations of those retaining walls would be, the darker black lines. So you can see directly behind the building or off of the plaza areas behind the building. This is the south building where most of this occurs. There's more flat up by the north building that they didn't need as many of the retaining walls. Retaining wall where the driveway will come out and onto Madison Street, and then more of a decorative retaining wall kind of take up the grade along the Madison Street, Delafield Street intersection, creating kind of a landscape feature at that location. So here you can kind of see this landscaped area along Madison Street. So the building itself is set back 62 feet from Madison Street at this location here. And then they have a sort of a plaza area. And then in green space, they'll be adding some landscaping around that area. And then here's the building at this location. Because as I again mentioned, the Delafield slopes down and the building comes across, there's exposed foundation on the far end of the building. So that where those areas occur, they're proposing to add at the end of the building some decorative art panels to cover those spaces. We'll have a little more detail on that as we go on. And then At the last meeting, it had been requested what's the view from the Delafield Street and Madison Street looking at the site. So here you can see the building is set back. Again, it's about 62 feet at this front portion of the building is set back. Then you can see what they're envisioning for kind of that landscape feature out there on the corner, possibly some signage in that area. And you can see how then that would use some of the same materials to try to tie in with the proposed art panels that will be proposed at the corner of the building as well. So that kind of gives you a feel. And then you can see the view going up towards Madison Street, going to the left. Again, by keeping that building set back 62 feet, they're preserving that view corridor along Madison Street going up and down the hill. With these plans, again, the hill does come down. They're looking to preserve the majority of the trees along the hillside, but at the bottom of the hill, where it gets close to the building and the parking lot area, there will be a need to remove some trees. They're proposing to remove 110 trees. There had been some confusion out on the site. If you were to go out and walk the site, there's many more. There's 200 to 300 trees that are marked with tape, but not every tree that's marked with tape is to be removed. Those trees are identified with a number on each of those tapes. And then in the plan here, they have numbers on the right of each tree that is to be removed, the number of that tree that was identified in their survey. So each tape, while out there on a tree, is not a tree that's necessarily going to come down. It's just identified in their survey. Only these 110 trees would be the ones removed. And as you can see on the plans, they're all the ones closest to where the parking lot is being done on the north and behind the north building, and then along the base of the hill around the south building. And then the existing trees along Delafield Street and towards Madison Street that had been used for landscaping for the City Hall Annex building that was out there. At the meeting in August, you had asked that we ask our city forester to take a look at the site. So he did go out and walk the site. He noted that the majority of the trees to be removed were kind of nuisance and invasive species, such as black ash and box elder. There's a lot of those out there. So he didn't see, and looking at that, quite a few of the trees up on the hillside are being preserved. So he didn't see a problem with the trees that they're proposing to bring down. Some of them were aged as well and not in the greatest of health. The only comment he made is that there is a ginkgo tree in front of the old annex building at 130 Delafield Street. That is probably the healthiest tree on the site, and he thought if that could be moved or saved somehow, that should be considered. It is a rather large tree, though, so he realized that would be quite an effort. Larger the tree, the harder it is to be able to successfully move them. But he said if there was a tree to keep on the site, that would be the one. But otherwise, the other trees on the site, he didn't have much upset over as far as seeing them removed, as proposed with this plan. So here is a picture of the, oops, where did that go? Of the site, kind of overlaid on an aerial photo from Google Maps. They fly their photos when the trees are in foliage. You can kind of see the extent of the trees. You can see the darker green going up the hillside and the extent of where that parking lot to the north is. So there's quite a few of the trees going up the steep slope there will all remain. And as you go to the south, the same thing. And then also, the landscape plan is proposing to augment the trees that were removed at the base of the hill with new and a mix of other species and much more hardy species as well. And you can see that along that north side by the parking area, and then also as you go farther to the south or to the left on this picture, where they brought in some other trees to kind of accent the site. And here is the topo maps, just kind of, again, showing the extent of that elevation change from the north to the south. You can see up at the north end of the site, on, lost my spot here. On the north end of the site, the elevation is about 854 feet at that top line crossing the far north end of the site and the Delafield Street there. That would be about 854 feet with the building height of about 50 feet at the northern end. That would put it right around 890 or so feet. The maximum airport height elevation for buildings in this area is at 989 feet, and this building would be proposed at about an elevation of 900 feet, the top of the roof line. So it's well under the airport elevation height for any obstruction from the airport use in the area. So there's no concern there. It's about 90 feet again under that airport height elevation. And then going to the south, the building only gets lower when you do the southern building, so there's no concern there with that one as well. Also on this topo lines, you can see as you go to the west on the picture, you can see the grade increases as you go up towards Randall Street. At the north end of the site, Randall Street is at 870 feet in elevation. And as you go to towards the south farther, it gets down to 862 feet in elevation. So again, at the north end of the site, that would be where the Delafield Street is at 854 feet. There's a 16-foot height difference. And the building, again, is being proposed at 50 feet. The properties along Randall Street are in the RM1 zoning district, and they have a maximum building height of 40 feet. So any building being built in the RM1 district could be built at 40 feet. So a property next to one of the existing houses there could be built at 40 feet in height. These buildings are several hundred feet away and are being, while the building itself is 50 feet high, it is starting at an elevation 16 feet lower, giving an essential height of 34 feet for that one. And then when you go to the south end of the site, where Randall Street is up at 862 feet, Madison Street is down to 826 feet at height, down by the intersection with Delafield and Madison Street. So that building is starting out 36 feet lower. So it ends up giving a height of actually about 28 feet if it was up on the grade with Randall Street, versus if it was built on Randall Street, it would have been, 60 feet high. So just to kind of show the perspective of the elevation there, as Randall slopes and then it slopes down to Delafield, while a 40-foot high building could be built right along any of those properties along Randall Street, this building will not have that much of a height because it's starting that much lower along Delafield Street, and then the elevation change between Randall Street and Delafield Street. I hope that made sense. So here's a picture again showing on the plans, the area in dark blue is the building above the parking garage. So that's the area that would be seen above the parking garage along Delafield Street. And this kind of shows the setbacks off of Delafield Street. You can see it gets closer to Delafield Street up at the north end. There's kind of that plaza area in the middle of the north building. And it continues down. South building is pushed up as close as they could get it to Delafield Street, so that's set back about 7 feet, creating more space between the properties from Randall Street behind them. So the average distance up at the north end of the building, the average distance along Randall Street is a little over 220 feet between the houses and where this new, the closest point of the apartments would be to the houses. extremes would be at the far north end, it's 260 feet away, and at the south end of the building, of the south building, it would be 135 feet away. So there is quite a bit of setback between the houses and the apartment building. And then here's just a cross-section to kind of show you the elevation changes and differences. So on the left side of the apartments is Delafield Street, and then to the right side is going up the hill towards the Randall Street and the properties that front onto Randall Street. Just to kind of show you that, gives you a scale of the distance. Again, average was about 200 feet distance, 220 feet distance between the buildings. And then you can kind of see the elevation change as well and how that affects the project. Again, the south building is on the top drawing and the north building is on the bottom drawing, and how it relates to the Randall Street corridor and to the Delafield Street corridor. You can see on the north building, the city hall across the street, about the same size as the apartments. Here was just the breakdown again of the apartment units. Again, 113 units in that north building and 106 units in the south building. A mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units across all levels of all 3 buildings, or I mean of both the buildings, all 4 floors. Then just looking closer at the north building in particular, here's just a close-up of the garage floor plan on the left, and then the building floor plan above the garage on the right. So you can kind of see those setbacks. For the most part, the plaza and building stay about 10 feet, at least 10 feet back from Delafield Street. The only spot it gets a little closer is at this location up on the north end. You can kind of see where the ADA ramp goes off. We usually don't count ramps or uncovered staircases as part of the building structure, but that gets a little closer to the sidewalk there for the ADA access purposes to get up onto that plaza, which is set back 10 feet. But you can see then how the building is set back with the green on the right. It would be the common space or plaza space with the recreational amenities for the residents. So the building's kind of set back and pushed closer to Delafield Street. And then the surface parking lot is set down at about the same grade of the underground parking, so that's well below the plaza. We have some renderings that'll show that more clear. So here's the elevations of the northern building. I'm using the same materials as proposed before. There's some composite wood material, as well as some cement panel and other composite materials that form the different colors of the building. Lots of undulations with some of the deck spaces being set within the building, other ones protruding outside to give a variation and breakup on the wall space, and then a breakup of materials. They wanted to keep that kind of wood composite material look out facing onto Delafield Street up here on this top elevation. Then they bring in some of the materials from the southern building as they go towards the back of the building, and especially as you get to the south of the building on the lower left, you can see where they're kind of trying to match up with the architecture of the south building where the two come together, and you'll see that reflected again on the south building also. So here's the floor plan again of the south building garage on the left. You can see the 2 access points. And then the building itself on the right, the green space out here is where the plaza area is for recreational amenities for that south building. Keeping the building up close to Delafield Street. Again, I mentioned it's a 7-foot setback off of Delafield Street. And where the grade's allowed, there are a couple of walkout units on that first level onto Delafield Street, so their uncovered stairs would go a little closer to the sidewalk than the 7-foot setback. Again, here's the elevations using those same materials, just in a different balance. And then having, again, protruding and recessed decks on all of the units. On here, on the top elevation, you can kind of see some of those first floor units that have the walkout opportunities. And then going around to the back of the building, carrying those same materials through. And then on the lower right here is where that south building will meet the north building. So you can see bringing in kind of mirroring architecture at that location where the drive will go between the two buildings. So again, you're looking at some of the renderings as they go around the site. Again, starting from the south, this is the view from the intersection of Madison and Delafield Street, looking at that south building. Again, you can see the area in the lower part of the building where they'd have the proposed art panels. And then moving up along Delafield Street, see how there's some opportunities for some walkouts, as well as just general staircase at the end of the building, exiting out onto Delafield Street. And then looking from the south along the south building, and then at the end of the south building here is where you can see the driveway would go in between the two buildings. And then here's looking at the very north edge of that south building, and then getting the majority of the south side of the north building into view. And you can see where the north building, the exposed basement comes up at the corner. They've added some of those art panels in there as well, underneath that bumped out white section there. And then here's looking from Delafield Street at that north building. You can see the plaza space. That's where the main entrance will be into the north building off of that plaza. And you can see the railings around that. The railings along the plaza areas will match the railings on the balconies. Here's just a better view of that plaza area to kind of see and get the feel of that space. So that kind of creates a little bit of separation from that main entrance out onto Delafield Street. It also creates a breakup of the plane because they brought the angles in at that point of the building to create a little visual interest there. And as we go to the north side of the building, looking down the back, you can see it starts to switch to more of the materials that are found on the southern building. And then here you can see where that surface parking is set down below the plaza area. This is the surface parking lot in the back. And then you can see the plaza where they have the amenities for the northern building. And in all these elevations, or renderings, you can get a better feel of the ins and outs of the building and the protruding and recessed decks, things like that. Here's a typical deck plan. They do use very generous sized decks. The decks were 6 feet by 13.5 feet, which are some of the larger decks that we've seen in plans recently. So that was nice to see as an amenity for the buildings. And I'd mentioned they'd do some art panels where the building was exposed on the far south ends of the buildings. Here's some concepts that they're looking at. They haven't made a final decision yet, but using some stainless steel, maybe some copper or bronze look. That's what they would use to work into those art panels, as well as on their signage for the project. They did provide a photometric plan, catalog cuts of all their exterior lights with using LED lights. It all conforms with our lighting standards. So for plan unit development, again, just to refresh the Plan Commission, there's a couple of points you need to consider. First, that review of the overall site, the proposed use, highway access, utilities, including water and sewer. This is on a well-developed road, Delafield Street. There's already existing sewer and water and utilities in the road. Whether the design, height, or exterior appearance of the structure is architecturally or aesthetically compatible with the surroundings. Whether the design or exterior of the appearance of the structure is identical with those adjoining as to create excessive monotony or drabness. Whether any exposed facade of the structure is constructed or faced with finished material which is aesthetically compatible with the other facades and presents an attractive appearance to the public and to the surrounding properties. Whether the structure or use would unnecessarily destroy or substantially damage the natural beauty of the area particularly insofar as it would adversely affect values incident to ownership of land in that area, or which would unnecessarily have an adverse effect on the beauty and general enjoyment of the existing structures and adjoining properties. Whether the structure and use would have a negative impact on the maintenance and safe and healthful conditions of the city. Whether the structure and use shall maintain existing topography, drainage pattern, and vegetative cover insofar as is practical. The Plan Commission may require that drainage easements be executed. Property owners shall comply with existing subdivision or development grading plans. Again, we kind of have a blank slate here with all the parcels that are being assembled. They have an extensive stormwater plan that went along with the plans. Whether there shall be adequate provision for safe traffic circulation in driveway locations, and considering location of driveways, the Commission shall consider the factors set forth in Section 6.13 of the Municipal Code. So location of the driveways just be taken into consideration when looking at that, along with recommendations from the Public Works Department. They've weighed in heavily and worked on the driveway locations with the developer as these plans have progressed for the last about year or so. And they're recommending the driveway locations as they are shown now. Also, whether there's adequate provision for parking and loading areas, whether the lighting will be installed according to applicable ordinances, whether there's adequate provision for public services as approved by the Board of Public Works and Water Utility, whether the structure and uses make appropriate use of open space and provide appropriate landscaping and planting screenings, whether the erosion control measures that are required by Chapter 32 of the code and Chapter 21 of the Wisconsin Uniform Dwelling Code are provided, and then the final thing, whether the structures comply with the airport height regulations. So those are the key points called out in our zoning code that the Plan Commission should be considering whenever looking at a planned unit development. And then here's just the summary table of some of the things they were looking for relief from in the zoning code. As we've talked about, the street yard setbacks, the rear yard setbacks, density limitations, and then the height limitations as well. The height, again, would be, the straight zoning would be 40 feet. With the proposed zoning, it's 50 feet, and the actual height at the highest point of exposure would be 62 feet. And then at the last meeting, the plan commissioners, a couple of you had asked about some existing PUD projects in our central city that may have be similar to this project. So looking back at our past plans, what the heck's going on? The River's Edge Apartments down on Main Street are a good example of that. I'm not sure what's happening here. The Mountain Village Apartments, a little farther south from this project. Spring City Crossing at White Rock and Moreland, a more recent one that was recently approved. And then I had one more on there too. And then the Bridgewalk Apartments, those most recent ones down in St. Paul as well. All of those are 4-story projects, very similar to this. And they use the PUD tool to allow for the higher height and higher densities, just as is being requested before you this evening. So at this time, staff would recommend for final site plan and architectural review for the Delafield Apartments with all city department review comments to be addressed. And then again, noting just like with the, you'd have the full approval of the site plan architectural review, but this has to go together with the PUD rezoning that you've already recommended approval for. These plans would then be attached with that PUD rezoning for approval by the Common Council.
Okay, thank you. Questions of Doug? Commissioner Keller?
Doug, remind me, because I don't recall. The north building's got, I don't know, 115 units, and the south building's got 109. But we have one ingress egress into the parking lot on the north building, and we have 2 on the south building. What's the reason for the second ingress egress on the south building? Especially the one coming out of Madison, which has got a much more intense grade than Delafield?
I'll try to get to the plan that showed those points. Here we go. So the north building, you can see the north circle. That's where the north building that's handling the traffic or the parking spaces for the surface lot and the underground parking. Because you're at the exposed end of that north building, the underground parking comes out right at that location. For the south building, and taking advantage of the grades, the exposed portion again would be at the south end of the building. So to work with the grades and to provide the access, the Delafield Street will be an exit only. The Public Works Department looked at that very carefully, and they felt that having only exit from that location would be a better situation because of the fact that if you can see off to the right there a little bit, East North Avenue has that turn that comes up onto Delafield Street. So then if cars were turning up that, and then there were cars wanting to turn left to get into the apartments from that side, that could create some traffic conflicts in that area. So they felt comfortable having an exit only there to help disperse traffic leaving the building, so it wouldn't all happen on Madison Street. And then the Madison entrance would be a full entrance and exit up at that end. And they felt that would be the best way to handle the traffic in and out of that south building.
Is there a poured concrete median that runs all the way up Delafield Street to the ingress egress between the two buildings? Or
No, there is
just
not.
paint? It's just paint?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's just paint because there is truck traffic that does use that East North Avenue up to Delafield route. And sometimes they do have to cross over that paint line to be able to make that maneuver.
Commissioner Montiel.
Thank you. I just want to double check my understanding. So the south entrance onto Madison from the south building, I believe there's 106 units in that building, and it's 1.3 spaces per unit, so that's 141 spaces roughly. And I think the traffic study said during peak morning hours it would be 10 cars coming out of that Madison, right?
Yes, so in the Madison building, there is 101 parking spaces in the south building.
Okay.
And then you're right, here I have the slide up with the number of movements coming out of the Madison exit shown in the lower left. You can see coming out at the morning time would be 5 vehicles to the right, 5 vehicles to the left during that peak hour.
Is there 106 units though in that south building? I'm just worried about, trying to figure out the math of
Yes, there's 106 units in the south building.
so that 1.33, is that apportioned over both buildings?
That's over both buildings, correct?
Okay, so that's the difference. All right.
Yep, it's over the whole project.
All right.
So there is excess parking spaces under the north building, and then they also have the surface lot as well.
Okay. And you said there's how many spaces, parking spaces in the south building?
In the south building, there's 101 parking spaces. The north building has 153. And then with the 38 surface spaces, there's 190 up at the north side and 101 at the south side.
And the traffic study is saying there's going to be 20 cars leaving during peak for
During
the
peak.
south building? Okay. All right, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions of staff? Okay, comments from the public. Provide your name and your address, please.
Hello, I'm Dan Romnick with Mandel Group, 330 East Kilbourne. Just wanted to say that I think Doug covered most of everything that I wanted to just address quickly tonight. I think the traffic was one of them. Again, and we just went over that, so I don't have to cover it again. I think the relative height was the other one, where the building is the most exposed on the site at the 62 feet is going to be at the lowest elevation on the site. So on that far south end of the south building is where you get the 62-foot height. That's relative to the Randall Street. That's 36 feet below that lot, which means the relative height of that building is very similar to what that two-story home is. So that's where the most significant height is on the site, and it's actually at the lowest point on the site. So hoping that that's kind of, we're looking at sort of the relative height and what could potentially be built up on top of the hill. And just to give that context. And then I think the last point that I wanted to just show here is on the density. I think we obviously did the Bridge Walk apartments, and that density was 65, 66 units an acre. And this one does have a little bit, it is a bigger site, but it's got lower usable site ratio, I guess you'd say, because of the hill. And so the density here is about 40, in the low 40s per acre, which again is kind of below some of the other sites that are in the relative downtown area, and specifically the Bridgewalk one. But I will be here if there are any other questions or clarifications that are required. So thank you
Okay,
all.
thank you.